what size is your carbon footprint?
The carbon footprint, that I don't know.
Whatever it is, the whole population of the world, make that a very, very big number.
How much carbon I produce? Is that it?
You mean the effect that my living has on the earth in terms of the products I consume?
The digital identity is not just a passport that you will have on your iPhone in a digital form. It entails just about everything the government would like to know about you. And yesterday in the Dutch media, we saw a perfect example of what it could entail in the near future. We had the CEO of one of the largest Dutch banks say, why don't we start with a personal carbon credit? A carbon wallet, she called it, actually. So right in line with the plans that the World Economic Forum people have for us. And she said it in a way that was particularly funny. She said, well, if everyone gets an individual personal carbon credit, why don't we make it so that rich people who, for example, want to go on holiday a little too often can buy personal carbon credit from other people who, for example, can't afford buying plane tickets or eating meat too often. So we can that way swap it out.
Could a bank or a bank account enable a sustainable behavior? One effective way, in our opinion, is to provide a real-time CO2 footprint generated by our customer spending. Following this belief, we have integrated the carbon footprint functionality inside our mobile application. From now on, every checking account customer at Findomestic Banca can check her or his financial balance, as well as her or his CO2 balance. At the very end, we could develop our carbon footprint features with the support of Duconomy, a Swedish climate tech startup.
Duconomy work with our partners as an enabler of a sustainable lifestyle for all by providing tools, helping us to connect our consumption with its impact on the planet, adding reliable data to daily life that help us measure, understand, and reduce our footprint. Our understanding of impact is already today reshaping all commercial activities on the planet.
Many companies are already taking steps to lower their emissions and to create a more sustainable and resilient future. People are also thinking about the environment in their daily lives, including making more informed decisions about what they buy. That's why we are pleased to welcome this initiative being undertaken by Duconomy. It is launching a credit card and an app in Sweden, which will allow its users to see the climate footprint of their purchases. It will then invite customers to reduce that footprint by compensating it. This can be done with United Nations certified green projects, reducing emissions and fostering sustainable development in other parts of the world. We are all part of the climate change solution. It includes businesses offering more climate-friendly choices. It includes consumers changing their habits to make climate-smart decisions. And it includes everybody on this planet taking individual action that ultimately help us build a more sustainable, resilient, and prosperous future.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to News from the Pew, where we take the news from around the internet and distill it down to make it a little less frightening. I'm your host, Rick Barrett, and we have the full panel back of gentlemen who I'm pretty sure all of them have outstanding student loans and are more than happy to have them terminated at any time. Starting with Stephen Cunningham from Census Fidelium, John Arrington as well, back fresh off of a very good presentation down in Dallas at Mater Dei, Mr. Ryan Grant, and Fawaz Yazi, who, if you're not following him on Instagram at Enoch, you're missing awesome content from him. Guys dropping new tracks seems like every day. And if you're not following him, you're missing out on that. So it's good to have everybody back. And we'll just jump right into it. We've got a lot of stories to cover, and it seems like not a lot of time to do it. Biggest news that we have for you from the week prior is the cancellation of student loan debt, theoretically. So it was announced yesterday by our supreme leader, Joe Biden, that he will be canceling up to $20,000. Of course, when I say canceling, I'm putting in air quotes. I don't like air quotes. You're just going to have to imagine air quotes around. Going to be canceling or forgiving $20,000 of student loan debt if you have Pell Grants. And if not, if you have non-Pell Grants, $10,000. And also, if you make under $125,000, you qualify. But if you make over, you don't. It's weird. All it's going to do is add almost $1 trillion in inflation to the debt and make everybody who's not signed up for a double master's in gender studies and all these other weird degrees actually get a payoff for bad decisions. So let's go to our man who hasn't been here in a while. That is, there it is right there on the screen. While you guys are taking a look at that, since he's been back, Ryan Grant, what do you think of Joe Biden's forgiveness?
I think what it really is a veiled bank bailout. Really, I really can't see it in any other terms. I'm just looking at this and I'm saying, okay, I mean, debts don't really go away. Somebody has to pay them. It's not like a Jubilee in the Old Testament. Like people are trying to compare things to that. I think it's rather ludicrous, where you have this, divinely mandated period where you're going to, free those who are in some kind of servitude. You're going to cancel all the debts, and that means the people involved are taking a loss on it. And they're doing so for a religious reason, and they're doing so by following what was decreed in the Old Testament, right? And it makes a certain degree of sense. What Biden is doing right here is essentially saying, I'm going to take money from you guys who had to work, who had to pay off your loans, or are just generally, having to pay more taxes on top of with the fact that the government's doing everything possible to make your money worthless. That it's doing everything possible to send, even though people need money pretty desperately, Americans need help. They're sending all that money to Ukraine again, which is going into somebody's bank account, not going to that country, whatever that country's needs might be. And on top of it, then, say, all right, you are going to pay for all these millennials in gender studies and underwater basket weaving and things like that who went to college and still can't get jobs because it's just crushing them down so much. And so, like so many things in modern discourse, you can't actually solve the problems because, solving the problems, that's going to tick off the people who benefit from them. Why is it people who graduate from college and spend $80,000, $90,000, $150,000 a year, or not a year, for 4 years, come out and they can't get jobs? There's some disconnect in the way the system works. But we can't fix that. Let's just forgive their debt, even though they've chosen to study things that aren't really particularly useful, that they don't actually make any money with, that there's no actual market demand for, or that they can't create market demand for. So let's help all these people out. It's particularly odious, I find. And again, all it really is another naked bailout for the bankers and the underwriters for various federal agencies who issue all these federal loans.
So, Fawaz, very interesting here because Yale, I think, has a $52 billion endowment. No, Harvard has $52 billion. Yale has $41 billion. The University of Texas at Austin, or Texas University as we call it down here, has, I think, about a similar amount in the billions of dollars in endowments. They have also been a part of this usurious system because of Freddie and Fannie were the only ones you could get loans through. So since they knew that, hey, I know classes cost $300 a credit hour last year. Now it's $500 a credit hour this year. And there was only one place to get that money. Colleges aren't going to have to, shouldn't the colleges have to have forked over their endowment, which they don't use? Or what part of the system they're getting away with their usurious practices, and yet you and I and the people that didn't take out these stupid loans have to suffer for it?
No, you're absolutely right, and so is Ryan when his first take regarding the banks. I think that's one part. That's one part of it. Anytime you have some type of situation like we had, for example, in 2008, where you had the real estate crash. I mean, since money can just be printed out of nothing, there's no gold standard. It just becomes a gigantic bubble that just keeps popping. And with the real estate, what they did is they the banks were bailed out. They got a blank check from Obama, and they took all that money and lended it to wealthy people. And what they did is they went out and bought all the homes and the real estate for dirt cheap. So it was a transfer of wealth. And every time you have a situation to where the bubble is getting to a point where it's popping, there's this shift from the poor to the middle to the high. Right now, I think it's happening is 125,000 a year. That's middle class, and you're asking a plumber who went to trade school making about 60 grand a year to pay off that person's school loan. So now we have a shifting of funds from one class to the next, so to make the poor poorer. The second part was what Ryan said. It is a big bailout for the banks. This gigantic check that's coming because you're just going to print it and give it to them. They're just going to create new money out of thin air and inflating the system. There's no solving of the root cause whatsoever. My personal opinion, I think college systems and all that stuff, the biggest scam that we've seen, one of the biggest scams we've seen in American history, especially when the government took over and started guaranteeing loans, like you just said, Rick. And I think the third, if you look at the polling data, which I have, who is Joe Biden's or the Democrats' best demographic in this upcoming midterms to get their base going? It's going to be low-income folks and college-educated white ladies, and also men too in college. So
you racist.
Yeah.
Where the white women at?
I think what they really want to do is they want the conversation to keep on going. It was the same thing to do with Georgia. If you remember back in 2020, the midterms, it was all about the stimulus checks. McConnell said, we don't want to do this. And they said, well, we're going to win Georgia now because, you don't want to help the middle class. And the same thing is happening right now is they want the conversation to go every time Republican or somebody from even though it makes sense what what we're proposing. Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's going to cause more inflation. It's not fair. When you're receiving something for free, you don't care who it hurts as long as you benefit from it. So it's going to get a bunch of these people to go out and vote in November because it's what their base is going to do. So they want the conversation to continue into this. All of a sudden, Ukraine is all gone. The Mar-a-Lago is all gone, and they keep shifting the conversation where they want to, and we keep following along.
Indeed. Jonathan, you work in education, so it's obviously probably heartbreaking for you to watch the idea of college where you're supposed to go and learn responsibility and get training in the classic liberal arts. It is now so far away from that, and it really just shows how far the education system has gone from here. And I also want to throw this question to you, John. Should Catholics, if they can opt out, should they participate in this bailout or not?
Well, it seems to me that there's not a lot of education going on, or not education in the classical Catholic understanding of that term anyway, in most of the modern universities, the overwhelming majority of them. So if you take a step back, you think, is that willed? Is that what they're after here, is actually to keep people stupid, but not just stupid, to keep them attached to other lower and baser pleasures, which is if you just spend a little bit of time, even on a college campus, I mean, anywhere, I'm talking, of course, outside of TAC or Thomas More, Christendom, something like that. You see what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the people there hooked at a younger age, an impressionable age, 18 to 22 or so, longer if you probably major for 6 years in gender studies. Get them attached to these baser pleasures, and then you're more or less held captive by Satan primarily, but also by his minions here on this earth, who are in perpetual cahoots with especially the Democrats, but then also the less principled of the Republicans, and they've got you essentially on a pretty short leash for the rest of your life. So I can't help but think that what they're doing, with a diabolical prudence here is actually pretty smart on their part. Get people hooked on vice. And don't give them a taste for truth. I mean, Rick, you mentioned, you talked in the first part there about being in education. They're not going to have a taste for the intellectual life as the great Catholic authors in the past have described it. So they're doing what they're doing here for a particular reason. You want to have no taste for the intellectual life, so for the higher things, and then have them attached to baser pleasures. And you've got the American populace where you want them at that point. So that's. I hope I answered your question, Rick. But that's kind of what I had in the back of my mind, and trying to meet you where you framed the thing. I think framed it well too.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I know you got a clip, Steve. You want to run that? You can throw your 2 cents in, sir, on this terrible.
The gimmick of student loans. That was a pretty good gimmick, for getting votes, and all the students bought into it. Naively, they buy into it and go, oh, this is almost like free stuff.
Yeah.
It probably someone said, they'll never actually collect it. That's exactly what happened. They're not collecting it. Of course, they're talking about, the bailout. But nobody complained a whole lot when they were introducing the program. Nobody remembers that precise moment that the student loan was set up. That's way back, because everybody liked that. The parents liked it. The students can borrow money and all this. But now, they're complaining because it looks like they're going to have to pay. The bill has come due.
Democrats are praising Biden for circumventing Congress. And this is this massive student loan, quote unquote, forgiveness that the Biden is doing. And this is, I thought, maybe I was not reading the Constitution right, Dr. Paul, but I thought that Congress is the one that appropriates money. Well, I guess there's some loophole that he found. It has to do with COVID that enables him to grab the money to pay for it. Now, there was a study done by the Wharton School, pretty well-respected school at Penn. Let's take a look at that. It was completed just a couple days ago, August 23rd. Forgiving student loans, budgetary costs, and distributional impact. And here's the essential part of it. If we can go to that next one. Here's the summary. We estimate that forgiving federal college student loan debt will cost between $300 billion and $980 billion over the 10-year budget window, depending on details. About 70% of debt relief accrues to borrowers in the top 60% of income distribution. Translated into English, a massive increase in inflation because of this another $1 trillion being spent. And the benefit to that will go disproportionately to those that have a higher income, i.e., it's welfare for the rich.
Yes, it is. And it's all because the feds are doing their fedly things. So, Steve, you're the whole part of the problem, too, is what Rand Paul was talking about, was when they federalized all of this. No longer were you getting a loan from your hometown bank or whatever the case may be. You had to go through, what is it, FAFSA or whatever it is, in order to get this loan, and that was only going to one place. So once again, it's the federal government. It's a textbook example of how terribly the federal government makes a problem and then solves the problem.
Problems. This if you get the government out of everything, it makes everything a lot better. I remember when I signed over those loans, going to college at Charleston. Lost my scholarship after they lost my transcript, so I had to take out some loans in that. At that time, I had zero clue what I was doing at that. Nobody tells 18, 19, 20-year-olds what they're doing, what they're signing for. They expect you to sign it over, and then they tell you at the end, oh, well, there's extra money involved. Go get you a TV, or don't pay it back. Go use it as income right then. And then if you play ball or anything like that, you're not allowed to work because you're supposed to go play. You're supposed to go to practice. That is your job. So now on top of that, that's how myself and others, there's quite a few of us like that. You went to go play ball on or some kind of a scholarship that may be like $250, maybe $500. Again, you're just looking to play ball and try to get education because that's what they told you to do at the formerly state-run school of high school. So you go in there and you end up not working. You put yourself in massive debt on credit cards. There's a whole program called it's on Netflix called is it Paid? And when it goes in, all these guys that used to play ball and they see how their coach has this brand new V8 Hemi truck, and y'all are sitting in the dorm trying to figure out how to scrounge for $1.90 to go to Wendy's or McDonald's to grab a burger just to eat, or begging your coach, hey, please, can you let us go eat at the cafeteria because that's our only source of food, and while you're making the big bucks off us, can we eat? Things like that. So, I mean, and now everyone's busting everyone's chops. And I get it on some cases because there are people that are out there paying it back. And then there are other people going, you know what? Why would I pay something back that they're going to do anyway? They're going to forgive it or get rid of or just eliminate anyways because there's a massive bubble and they've been talking about it for a while. Here's Peter Schiff's website that has a little bit about it because the Brandon administration has already canceled about $32 billion in student loan debt for more than 1.6 million Americans through programs targeting public service workers, disabled borrowers, and students who were defrauded by specific schools. You could also throw in there the military. I know people get mad about that, but people join the military just to pay these things back. Student loan debt in the U.S. totaled $1.59 trillion. At the end of the second quarter, about 43 million Americans hold student loan debt. Less than a third of those owe less than $10,000. Again, you go in, I'll put this in the show notes for people to check it out. But yeah, you go with colleges increasing their tuition because they get in debt with the government. You see the graphs, it just goes up and nothing else changing. It's not like that you get any income coming out of it. It's nothing. It's basically inflation, as you brought it up before. Instead of going to community college or JUCO or things like that, you have to go to the 4-year run school. You have to get this. You have to take out $50,000 to get a degree in basket weaving. And then when you get out of it, there's what job are you getting? I remember doing Uber, and there's this guy in the back seat, and he goes, "This is his first year out of college." He goes, I know I'm going to get $100,000 job just because I'm breathing or something like that. These guys expect. Now, it probably wasn't like that when we were young, but now these kids that come out of college expect to have 6-figure jobs just because their presence, just walking through the door. And it's almost shocking. And I look back and I almost want to punch a guy out of the car. It's, dude, welcome to reality. That ain't happening unless you bust your tail at it. And none of these guys care about busting their to get to hit the good job, to work hard, to have the discipline to it. They just want me. It's that whole life of everything's about me. There was a stat I just saw today, like 40. We'll take the whole thing, whole union. 43% of people coming out of high school think they're going to be a social media influencer now. You're talking about meaningless life.
1 out of 3. 1 out of 3. I saw that.
And why do you need to go to college for that? Most of the real social media influencers that you see in different fields and in different things, they did not go to college, or else they didn't really accomplish anything, or college did nothing for what eventually became what they did for many of them in different places on the internet and social and entertainment. And, the guys who get 10,000 to 15,000 people watching their live streams, a lot of them did not go to college, or if they did, it was in something completely unrelated to what they're doing now. If you're look at what you get for going to college. You get a piece of paper. It says you did some degree program. And now, as a result, you come out and now you owe that money back, and you don't have doors opened up for you. When I went to college about 24 years ago now, they told us that Oh yeah, you get a bachelor's degree, you can go anywhere, you'll get a job just like that.
Yep.
It was already a lie in that day. And the master's degree was really coming around as a thing that would get you a job, depending on what the field was. And so they should have been telling people, hey, what do you want to do with your life? Why don't you take a couple of years to go to trade school? And then if you decide you want to go back, then these options are available to you. No, they want you right away. Don't learn real life skills. Don't learn marketable skills. Go to the universities, which even, when I went, many of the public ones, and they were run by Marxists, and learn all this to be good, obedient servants to the state, consume next product, and, wait to consume next product. And that's really what it is. Even now, it's not just a lie. It's a monstrous, irresponsible, malicious lie that if you go to college, you'll come out and get a job. And they still tell you that in school, in high schools. They still tell you, yeah, you want to be prepared to go to a good college because that'll set you up for life. And it's known to be a malicious lie, and yet they still push it. They still want you doing it because it's another piece of this level of financial fraud that you see going on. I mean, the real purpose of a university should be the learning of letters and the training and the classics and the things that make you a better human being at what you do, right? And then from there, if you're probably going to gravitate toward something that employs the humanities, something in political or government service or back to university position. But like if you're doing something that's worthwhile from an academic standpoint, like history or literature, things that are worthwhile when they're taught classically, what are your actual options in the world? Well, wait for someone to die in some position to compete against 1,000 people in order to get that job, right? In some university or something like that. Maybe you get lucky to get a decent paying job in a high school. A lot of those jobs are getting harder in the actual schools that do well, that you want to work at. That's actually decreasing as well. So, all around, we really should be, unless you're extraordinarily gifted and you have a plan, you probably want to do a directed readings course in these kind of subjects rather than, everything really, we should be looking in my opinion, as a solution to how to bring education in outside of academia, how to train people how to do actual history without having anything to do with academia. Some of the very best historians that I read, who are all in the sources, citing the sources, writing good history, they're not academics, right? Most academics are entrenching themselves in producing worse and worse garbage as they go along.
It's very interesting.
The same thing.
It's very interesting you say that. God rest my dad's soul. When I was coming out of high school, he literally told me, I don't care what kind of degree you get. I just want you to get a degree because that's something you can fall back on. And to my dad was taught that. So that's why he was just looking out for me. But to be completely honest, I should have gone to a gunsmithing school. I should have gone to some kind of, because I'm good with my hands and I enjoy firearms and stuff like that. That would have been a good skill for me to have going forward, and it would have been something beneficial to society. And I wouldn't have had the debt that I have today. But, parents are told you're not a good parent unless your kid goes to college. You have to send your kid to college because you don't want to be the mom sitting at the weekly Oprah's book club telling that little Johnny's not going to college, little Johnny's going to be a lineman, or little Johnny's going to be a barber, because then the rest of the Y moms are going to look at you and be like, you're not going to let your child have the experience of going to college? What are you talking about experience? Hey, congratulations. Now you have the experience of being in debt. You just don't know how it is. So,
and a whole lot of drunken revelry
because of that.
Steve Ryan. Steve Ryan, then Fawaz. Go, Steve.
No, so I was just going to say that I'm surprised they haven't killed Mike Rowe because of that. I mean, if no one knows who that is, Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs. I mean, he's one of those guys that don't even go to college, go to tech school, go to trade school, like Ryan just brought up. Learn how to do this. I mean, you go up north for welding for $200,000 job, salaries. The people are begging for, you can write your own check basically if you're AC repairman or
lineman down
plumber.
here in Texas. That's why I mentioned lineman.
Yeah.
Yep. Ryan.
I think I just went on a huge rant. If Jonathan's free, I think actually getting Jonathan's thought on whether you should or shouldn't go to college and what solutions, I think.
Absolutely. While we wait for John, go.
Okay. Sorry, trying to find the good net here.
Do you want us to let Fawaz go while you look?
Oh, yeah, please.
Fawaz, I knew you were going to get in here.
No, I just wanted to say something. I know what people also didn't listen to Joe Biden's speech. He wasn't just trying to cancel some of this debt, but he also was talking about now making school free from for 16 years rather than 12 years because he wants to they want free college, and then people are saying well other countries do it. When I looked into it, a lot of these other countries, what they do is they'll make college free, but they track the student as they're getting older. Was when by the time you're in eighth grade or high school, they see what you're specifically good at, and they kind of drive you to that direction. It's not this whole go off to college, face your dreams and aspirations, do whatever you want to do, and then the your neighbor will just foot the bill. No, it's actually more specific of what the person. So, are we going to do that? That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a free ride.
Right. I think John, if he's looking.
Well, I'll say one more thing too, just to piggyback off of Fawaz's point. I think it's really important in terms of the level of control. Just like he's talking about, they track you. You're in the system. You're on the grid, as it were, because then the government gets more and more access already in this country. You look at Obamacare. Obamacare was a manifest disaster from just from the numbers standpoint. It's for the consumer. It's largely again a bailout of insurance companies because Obamacare insures absolutely no one. It simply requires you to go get insurance and to say, oh, and here's these plans that you can't afford. I mean, one job I worked at. And they're like, oh, we got health insurance. Look at these plans. And I was like, yeah, to insure all of my kids, I'll be making exactly $10 because all of the rest of it's going to this, right? Why? Why do people, they get you on this and then they have absolute control. Everything is tracked and surveilled. And what's one of the biggest things we saw them talking about in the World Economic Forum and all these other places, like, oh, the best way to have record keeping is through medical records. And we should tie in the medical records, which begin with your V word, right? And then tie that in with schooling. And then basically you have a perfect, complete ID, surveillance, every last thing about you that can be fed into the matrix, as it were, through that. So that's the other reason you want this further control, government, everything on education, because it consolidates that control in one place. It ties in perfectly with the medical industrial complex, and it brings all of that together for the perfect surveillance system.
John, what do you want to just put a coda on this whole thing? Should a kid go to college? Should they not go to college? And wrap up on what we were talking about.
Yeah, well, one thing that comes to mind as all of you were talking too is just how this all relates to the faith. And the thing that comes up over and over again in my mind is the way the breviary talks about someone's young formation almost without fail. They'll say, in the breviary lessons for particular saints, like they say for St. Louis the King today, educated or basically raised, by devout parents, or in this case, by a especially devout mother. But it comes up almost every single life of the saint that you read in the divine office. Pis parentibus educatus, and basically raised by devout parents, or how miraculous. And we're talking about that is something that is outside the normal order of nature. That's basically the right definition of a miracle. It is for someone who's not raised in a devout setting to then embrace the faith and become a great saint. It's not the normal order of nature, for that sort of thing to happen. It's a great working of grace that overcomes nature, but that's not the way that God has willed that things should normally work. So I would say no. We want to do, as a parent, I would do everything in my power and everything I could, and I'm just talking about everything, literally, to keep my children away from the environment that the average school has. I'm talking about the average Catholic school as well, sadly, the average one. If it were an extraordinary school where I could trust not just the safety of the moral life there, but then also they'd awaken a desire for the intellectual life. That's the only reason that you should be spending that, as Steve was talking about, that free time, because they don't want to let you have a job. They don't want to let you spend time prudently, basically using your time wisely. It seems like with these different restrictions, if they can't allow that, if they can't see that you could devote your time to encouraging a true interest in the intellectual life, you got to do all you can to keep them away from that, because I know it's kind of an old trite phrase, but the idle time is the devil's playground. And that's essentially what you're going to be dealing with these modern universities if they're not awakening a true love for the intellectual life.
Agreed. So yeah, that all great points, gentlemen. So let's move on to a great example of somebody who came out of the university system and then had a useless job for 38 years. That's Mr. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who now decided that he's leaving in December. So, Steve, let's roll a couple clips to give it everybody up to speed.
Particularly the last one, the shutdown, the sweeping shutdown that some said made things worse.
No, I don't, Neil. And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down a country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier. There are those who say you shut down you destructive things by disrupting the economy. And others say, well, if you save so many infections by shutting down, why didn't you shut down 2 weeks earlier? But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down, I mean essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How can we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator.
I'm just sick of seeing him. I know he says he's going to retire. Someone needs to grab that little elf and chuck him across the Potomac.
Now I need to caution everybody against the hate against short people. As a short king myself, I think we need to pause. And Ryan knows this. Ryan saw me firsthand. He knows it. As a short king myself, can we just comment with the elf tossing comments? All right, Fauci does not represent all of us as one short king to the rest. So Ryan. Everybody on conservative Twitter, everybody in conservative circles, oh, what a win. He's leaving. We got him. You didn't get him. He did what he wanted. Yeah. He got over $400,000 a year. He's going to retire with his pension. He's going to ride off into the sunset. The dude absolutely won. Now, he'll suffer at the four final things. That's a different, unless he converts and repents and all that stuff, blah, 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 as I say. But, Ryan, it's not a win. Why are they acting like it is one?
People are desperate for a win. People are desperate to have something where they can say, oh, wow, look, see, he's gone. Woohoo, we win. He's only gone because he wants to. He's tired of being in line, or he, carried out his job as he needed to. The clip that we're playing here where he's blatantly lying to Kuvuto there, it's obvious that he doesn't think he's going to get away with it. He's doing that on purpose to trigger people like us, get us all worked up, and you have videos like with the whole reel of, him contradicting himself. That's all on purpose, right? And it's the same type of thing you read in Orwell. The blatant lie, it's meant to demoralize, dishearten. It's a form of gaslighting. And in this case, he knows that people are going to immediately seize upon anything he's ever said to, prove that he's lying. He doesn't care, right? It's just meant to, further stir the pot, get people angry, demoralize, and because he knows he's virtually untouchable. He's not being thrown under the bus. He served his purpose. He crafted all of the architecture, which will be used for the next unspecified virus of unspecified origin. So it's not a win.
No, it isn't a win. But Fawaz, we have a guy who was thrusted into the limelight, took full advantage of that time there, became almost a godlike figure to people on the left. Everything he said was law, was to the fact that churches were shut down, everything was shut down on their advice of him and Dr. Brinks. and Pete, to kind of follow up the first question I gave to Ryan, I'll give to you. People have to reconcile with the fact that this man in this life, as long as we see it right now, will escape scot-free. And his impact and the decisions that he made as the director will be followed years to come.
Right. Yeah. And tough talk from DeSantis. That's great. It's all we hear from the Republicans. The same thing. I mean, put this on Trump too. You're the one who put him in this task force. Lord Farquaad, and every time he's at the Senator Poole, and his rhetoric. Yeah. My thing with him is people are saying, well, he's leaving in December because the Republicans are coming in the House and they're going to put him under oath and things like that. I don't buy it for this specific reason. They don't have the backbone to do anything to him, to be honest with you. And I think he might be stepping down only because he's told to step down. It's exit stage left. Let's bring on this new person now. You've done what you needed to do for the regime. And my wife wishes that I could love her as much as Fauci loves himself. I mean, the guy's got the saint candle in his office right behind him when he's doing these interviews of himself. And you have somebody who's got that much ego, that much vice, in charge of anything is the scary part. And the problem is there's no backbone in the virtuous man who are holding this person accountable, because he should be held accountable in all the stuff he's done. Not just the past couple of years, but the last 38 years. So is it a win? Time will tell.
Yeah. We have to go to John, who had his governor with the tough talk on the Fauci, but we also have to understand that it was DeSantis pushing back. I know Kristi Noem was always open, but that's North Dakota. There's 15 people there. You didn't have to shut the place down to begin with because nobody was going to see each other. But Florida was the first one to push back, and so Fauci with his rhetoric, but still the legacy of a guy like Fauci is nothing more than a bureaucratic servant who just could not wait for his time to come. And if it wasn't for a guy like DeSantis, who knows how much more that impact would have been.
That's a good point, Rick. I had not actually thought about that. Is if there weren't people, spurring some sort of fight back. I mean, Gwen, like the others have cautioned already, and I think rightfully so, especially what Fawaz said there. I mean, how many have the backbone or the will to push back? Besides maybe Rand Paul and a few others that are actually in either the Senate or the House right now. I don't know. It doesn't seem promising. Those who come in, potentially November/January, seem to be pretty good, as from what you can tell from primaries and whatnot. Assuming they're going to be elected, I don't know. My biggest worry with him, though, is a little bit broader than simply what happened with COVID. It's how his lies and clearly the harm that he has caused to so many people from HIV/AIDS on to now he's never once been really brought to answer for any of what he did back especially in the early 90s there with HIV/AIDS. I mean, someone like him, in my mind, he's a bit like an Epstein, character. He's done so much harm, and it's a harm that if it's left unpunished, kind of like with Epstein, I think it's going to eat at us. I think that's why the guys are right that we need a victory right now against someone like him, because it's so devastating what he has done from the late 80s up until now. Eventually, if anybody ever hopes to get America as a nation back on track, Fauci has to be punished, or his memory has to be brought up. Yes, there has to be a damnatio memoriae, as the ancient world knew. You have to really say everything that this man did, basically from day one, has been a disaster for almost everyone he encountered who wasn't, going to benefit directly from the payoffs that he got, surely from the different pharmaceutical companies. So there has to be some sort of punishment at some point. I know that some are cautioning, once Republicans get power, you just need to bury old, enmities and move on to no. We need justice. It's actually what we need. And justice in this case would mean that he pays severely, and that those connected with him who also benefited from it pay severely for all the incredible, the unbelievable amount of damage they've done to so many different people, and especially those who are suffering from various maladies.
Indeed, that's very well said, John. Steve, there is no better example of why you need to divorce from DC than having your entire life dictated by Lord Farquaad, as Fawaz so correctly put it. I mean, this guy was a nobody except the damage he did. John brought it up. People still don't know the impact that Fauci's research on the AIDS epidemic, that whole thing there with the vaccine there, and how the amount of damage he did there and all this other stuff. But you don't want to live in it. People still want to live there. They can't wait for the midterms, Steve. You know, we're going to get our guys in there and blah, blah, blah. We've said it 1,000 times before. But even if you get the Republicans in there, you'll just get another Fauci or another Dr. Briggs. Eventually, somebody will be there, as long as you trust what? As long as you trust DC, right, Steve?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Divorce from DC, get away from Fauci. Yeah, that's a bumper sticker right there. It's one of the top 10s. And you get a pay raise for leaving, and you get rid of Fauci. But in a sense, he basically ran the world. So there's no way of getting around him. If you want it, and everyone's brought this up, but if you really want to get into who Anthony Joshua Fauci is, go get the book by Kennedy on Fauci. It's about yay big. It should be a weapon, because if you smack somebody upside the head with it, you might knock them out. But that thing is full of all kinds of insanity that this man has done since he's taken over. At the time when AIDS was just nothing, and he made it something. He did a great sales pitch to be able to get the CDC, which was on the verge of elimination, to be something that people know off the top. It's in TV shows. It's in pop culture now. At the time, they were trying to figure out why they even need to keep the lights on there, why it even needs to be around. Thank you, Anthony Fauci, for making that how big it is. I would pay money to have Kerry Mullis toe to toe with Fauci at beginning all this. Who, if you don't know who this is, Mullis died pretty much a couple weeks before all the nonsense was going on, and he challenged Fauci down in a
vicious car accident.
Yes.
Yeah, car accident.
And he challenged him. He was wanting there's all kinds of debates down in University of South Carolina, but he wouldn't do it. Fauci wouldn't do it. And Mullis was tearing him around. He tore him up for years prior to all this. And it was just one of those, love to know what would happen if he didn't die before him. But yeah, this guy, man, the best thing to do is be able to throw the key away, Nuremberg 2.0 him, and lose it afterwards. But that's never going to happen. And the guy's made more money. I think he was like $470,000 salary, most money that anybody on Capitol Hill was making. He's the king. I mean, he was literally. I mean, when Trump gave emergency access to him, what was it, April 2020, and basically he was taking over the show. People deny that Trump did that. He he ceded power to these guys. And it's over. I mean, where's representation after that? I mean, you hear me talk about, no taxation against representation is what they went out for in 1776. And look at what we are today. We talk about the student loan debacles. We talk about the debt debacles, the bubbles that are coming out. We talk about the cars, the the ESGs, all this nonsense. I don't know how somebody could just go around and say, you know what, this is working. We should keep this up. We need to make sure Fauci and things like that never, we have somebody like him all the time. We don't want that to go away because we need our safety. We need Big Daddy to tell us how we should live and not be terrified, even though they say one thing one year and then the complete next year they're saying not, the whole thing is a sham, or, you shouldn't be wearing a muzzle one year, the next year, 4 months later, you should be wearing 3 of them. How people didn't just raise up, and I'm not calling for violence, but man, if you look at for people to talk about the USA as this glorious land of the free and home of the brave and see what they were doing out in Europe, with Italy, France, all these guys standing up and taking to the streets every weekend, Australia, New Zealand. It's an embarrassment for the States, but hey, it's football season. I'm surprised he waited. I'm surprised he did it now and not like, this week 2 of the NCAAs or things like that. Because that would have been, no one would have paid any attention. No one would have cared. But here's
but you see, he needs that. He needs people to care and pay attention.
I think that looks like.
And shower him with that kind of stuff.
Well, maybe this will give him more time to be a mentor. I hope it gives him more time to write and to be an inspiration to young physicians and kids in high school. I would say that I would hope that this president would give Dr. Fauci the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but he's already received the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Give him another.
I think he's probably frustrated with how much politics has polluted the work that he has to do. He's not just a scientist and chief medical advisor to the president, but the world in which he lives has been incredibly politicized. Just last week, there were, members of Congress telling him to clear his calendar when the House changes majorities so that he could testify, pretty much, full time. The concept of doing that, I think, has to be very, very unappealing for him.
You mentioned the AIDS crisis. I mean, he was on far before COVID had anything. I mean, he really was on the front lines of the AIDS crisis. What do people need to remember about that?
Well, he received a lot of criticism, and some of it I think well placed. But I think when you talk to people who have been central to the AIDS and HIV crisis for the last 40 years, I think he's come to gain their respect. I think he has listened to his critics, and ultimately HIV/AIDS has been transformed into a disease that, when I was a resident, killed every single person that it infected, to now a chronic disease that people live very long and very healthy lives with, and that hasn't happened without people like Tony Fauci, and it hasn't happened without his leadership.
Sorry, I know there's 5 more seconds. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, what? Come on, man. Without him.
Get the book by that Kennedy did on Fauci if you want to read. No, the guy knows nothing, and there's plenty of links to show about it. And it's kind of like, I was thinking dictator Pope in a sense, because he when this guy gets mad, he turns into a little tyrant. From what everyone in there is chronicled, everyone's talked about, this guy just gets mad and it becomes almost like a mobster in the sense that, all right, you're done. How do we off this guy because he challenged my authority?
And from retirement too, he'll be a little more powerful. Just listen to that fellow they're interviewing. Oh yeah, I hope he just writes a book. I mean, he's going to come out and make, start talking whenever anything happens. If somehow you have someone following policy the elites don't want, he'll come out and say some nonsense, and the media will back him up. 100% put all this pressure to bear. So he'll still be like a godfather behind the scenes.
Watch him do what every politician, and he is a politician, he's just going to start a fund. He's going to start some kind of like foundation, the Anthony Fauci World Health, giving I'm Amazing Foundation or whatever. And it's going to be a platform to get donations. And like you said, Ryan, he'll be able to pontificate, and I use that word specifically, pontificate, on any matter of health that he wants with no repercussions.
Give it a month. Give it a couple months. I mean, you already see in Australia, people are having problems down there. There was a video out. People are 7 times sicker than they normally are down there. I've talked to many people in this area already, not just this area, the States, that people having issues with 2 to 3 weeks. I'm one of them. For some reason, I caught something. I can't get rid of the darn thing. Wait till the winter hits. And then Fauci's going to be pulled out and he's going to be on every talking head show to talk about what's going on and how come we need it, what we need to do. And they're going to listen, as Ryan brought up, and they're going to come out with books for him. They'll end up having a movie made for him. This guy is good. This is the best PA decision he made is retiring, quote unquote. And he's just going to get out in front of more places. Wait for the next Netflix special.
First, I'm already calling it now. Tom Cruise is playing Fauci. Second, in the movie when it comes out,
is he tall enough?
But secondly, I sent you something, Steve, that I want you to look up on that. Fawaz, I know you got to run in a couple minutes. Do you want to give us your Saint of the Week and Cry Room so that way you can get out of here when you need to?
Yeah. So just really quickly, my cry room is going to be. I know I'm a little late on this, but I'm going to put Garland on there, the head of the DOJ, only because, I mean, to make a historic press conference that he did, to try to explain himself goes to show you how much he botched this whole situation. And then it's just not much explanation here. It's just, I just think he belongs in the cry room because, to me, it just sounds just petty. Because Obama elected him to be the Supreme Court nominee. Trump took that away from him, and here's his revenge. So I'm gonna put him on there for his. And then my Saints of the Week, I didn't really want to do this, but I'm gonna put Shia on there only because I just heard he converted to Catholicism, and I was watching his interview with Bishop Barron, and he actually, because he played Pio, he said on there that he fell in love with the traditional Latin Mass because he had to learn it in order, he had to go there so many times. And he said on the interview, it was kind of funny. He goes, I didn't know where to go first, so I called Mel Gibson because he's into that traditional stuff. Is what he said. And then he was talking about, you should go watch the interview. At the end, he was talking about how he appreciates the traditional Latin Mass so much. So hey, if we can get this guy to become a traddy, welcome to the team, Shai.
Now, speaking of which, Steve, I know I just sent it to you, but we actually have Shai talking with Beefcake about the Mass and why he prefers the Latin Mass to the Novus Ordo. And he says this, it's the Twitter one right in front of you. You're blocked. Never mind then. Don't worry about it. No, but well, you'll find it online. It's essentially, I'll read it to you because I'm an idiot and I can't do this video stuff. But he says that why does he do it? Because he feels like they're not selling me a car. That's what he says that right to Barron. So that's why he said the Latin Mass affects me deeply. And then Barron's like, why? He says because it doesn't feel like they're selling me a car there. So good. Good for Shai in that regard. I was very much like, be careful with the movie and this guy because I thought we were gonna get burned, but apparently, hey, good for him. Glory be in that regard. But switching back real quick, so I got your Garland. Now, Steve was talking about this. They're turning on him already. They're laying the groundwork to get after Trump for Operation Warp Speed. Trump administration pressured the FDA to authorize unproven treatment. We told you it was unproven for COVID and the first COVID vaccines, jabs, on the accelerated timeline. So they're setting it up so when everybody's sick and everybody's, having these, because the spike proteins are they're getting everybody infected and all this other stuff and clots and blah, 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 take your pick. They're already saying Trump's fault, not Fauci, not Brinks, not any of them, Trump. So, and also this is a way to get Trump, because Trump has been an idiot and he is promoted and said, my vaccines are so beautiful and they help so many people and it's amazing. That's me. And now they're like, we got you on tape, bud. We got you on tape talking about the vaccines and it's your fault. So, gentlemen, you all pretty much called it and now they're starting to do it. They're starting to go after him in that regard.
Yeah, it's easy to figure out. I mean, you saw what's going on the last couple of weeks, the Mar-a-Lago thing. I mean, this is just another one of those, let's try this. They're throwing stuff at the wall, seeing if it sticks. Sure. Because when everyone starts going, getting a little, they're starting problems up in the wintertime coming up, you got to blame somebody. Who they're not going to blame Brandon. They're not going to blame Fauci. Burks has already said these things aren't going to work. Who's the easy one? Who's the popular guy? Literally, I mean, they could say the NFL went down and they would blame Trump for it or something. I don't think they'll find anything they can to blame him on him.
But more than just the regular derangement,
with it because I mean, he's not. I mean, he ticked somebody off I want to know who he did. I don't know if it's the WF guys or what, because man, these guys, I mean, after he won the election, we played the clip before of him saying, my good friends, the Clintons over there, thank you for coming to the inauguration breakfast. They're all friends. Then all of a sudden something happened. I want to know what was that something that happened that really made these guys turn on it.
He denied Hillary Clinton the victory. He denied the Queen her seat.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. In that clip, they're friends. I mean, a whole locker up.
Nobody's friends in politics, bro. Nobody's friends in politics.
It's the same thing.
Especially
it's show business for ugly people. They all friends and they all love each other. And
that was Hillary's spot, man.
They're all cliquey.
That was Hillary's spot. Nobody was supposed to take that from the Queen. So, and the Queen will make sure that she takes that personally. Ryan, jump in.
Unlike the normal Trump derangement issues of blaming Trump for this, that, and everything else, this one is actually well-deserved. He's the one who's been promoting this thing from the beginning. He's taken credit umpteen billion times for having put this thing out there, warp speed and all that nonsense. And so, I mean, the blame is justly given, at least in part. Of course, they're going to exclude everyone else that they want to, kind of canonize behind the scenes. But at the same time, it's not like he had nothing to do with it. This is, legitimately something to lay at his doorstep. However, more to Steve's point, what is the wider the wider angle that's being played here by the powers that shouldn't be? Why is it, again, focusing on Trump? The best thing you could do if you truly wanted Trump to go away is to completely ignore him. Shut him out. Never talk about him again, because that's, of course, what he thrives on. That's what his ego thrives on. And, of course, he is a great disruptor, a lot like David Lloyd George and people like that back 100 years ago. And it's kind of Trump's role, is to come in and disrupt everything. But it's almost as if everyone is being corralled back to Trump. Right? You get the hate on him. See, look how much they hate on him. And people, and of course, there is this strange almost level of a religious cult following of Trump, no matter what he does. It's willing to overlook everything. Oh, yeah, well, Fauci just forced this vaccine on him. He had nothing to do with it, even though he is rather taking credit of it. And he's proud of it. He stands and he takes the boos that he gets for that and still continues over the booing of the crowd to again, take credit for the, producing the greatest pokey ever. So I tend to think that what we're seeing is the corralling of everyone towards Trump yet again. And I mean, for what's politically speaking, rather ill-advised. I mean, if you're a smart political actor, you're going to push for somebody like DeSantis to run, I'm just speaking objectively. I'd much rather see DeSantis stay in Florida. But besides that, because it's just going to polarize it. But that's the one, I mean, Biden's is so, how do I put it correctly? He's not terribly loved by Democrats, and you had a strong conservative candidate. A lot of people will at least stay home if he's running against Biden or Kamala. But unfortunately, that's, if you get Trump, everyone's going to be motivated to get out there and vote. And again, push everyone back into that heavy division, push towards conservatives, towards Trump. And then when he gets in and puts forth a whole bunch of things that don't actually benefit anyone, and takes credit for it, again, it'll move us down, the pike. So I actually think this is what they want.
Yeah, it's great TV coming.
Yeah.
What sounds more better, a Trump versus whoever, or DeSantis for Trump's going to get the ratings?
Mm-hmm.
He is. It's all about TV ratings, that stuff too. Plus, they're so obsessed, like you said, Ryan, on getting him. So they would like to put him back into DC so they could, because that's closer to the swamp, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's closer to the swamp,
right.
And they can march him out that easier. So, and then all these other things. I don't know if you want to.
If it was truly that dangerous, everyone would just kind of come together and hand out cigars and shake hands and all agree to never mention his name ever again.
Yeah, I mean, he essentially is fake. He's not on Twitter. He doesn't go on shows outside of Fox Morning every once in a while. Mm-hmm. Nobody pays attention to Truth Social. So they literally, if they don't talk about him, he would be useless. So they want to keep him in the public frame. They want to keep him, still around so that when these things happen, I guess, when the vaccines or the jabs start having negative impacts. Also, in the left's mind, he's a great foil to Fauci. Fauci could have done so much more if it wasn't for the hulking lurd that, kept him from being so amazing and all these other things. So he's also the best villain. So everything that goes wrong is always Trump's fault in that regard. He is that perfect villain. And you're right, that having DeSantis there actually being a more controlled Trump is not good for any of them. Because, yeah, he says the elf comment, but whatever. I mean, that's not, Trump would have said it like, you know, the stupid little elf, I'll toss with one hand, and it would have been even better. But, you know, in that regard. I don't know, John, you have any thoughts on any of this?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think you nailed something there, Rick. Like he and Ryan kind of brought it up that if they need Trump as a villain, but to me the most frustrating thing is if Trump really understood what was best for the country right now, if someone understood it and could convince him of this, which maybe that something like that would be possible if he had, someone that he would listen to who's prudent on these things, like maybe a Victor Davis Hanson or someone. They'd say, listen, they need you as a boogeyman right now. If you were to go radio silent and literally just hide out in Mar-a-Lago, never allow a reporter to don't go on Fox Morning ever, don't do anything, don't post anything, just ghost them. All right, be a ghost. Maybe they would work. I'm sure they'd work overtime to try to find another villain, but some of the spotlight, some of the need for blame would probably be turned on the folks who are actually to blame or more to blame than Trump is, even for the crazy stuff that he did with the warp speed and the vaccines. And that would be most beneficial for the country right now. So, gosh, if we could find someone who could convince Trump, just shut up, hide, get out of the picture totally. I mean, eventually people's memories kind of, are purged of things like this in some sense. And then the spotlight goes back on them, maybe sometime even before the elections in November. And who knows, maybe something slightly better happens in the wake of your going radio silent and being ghosted like that. But I don't know. I don't know.
I want to serve it real quick.
Vote harder.
Okay. I want to serve it real quick to John before I know you got to go. I know you wanted to mention Archbishop Weekland, just to make a note of that so people are aware of it. If you want to throw that in, and then you can give me your cry room, and then if you got to head out.
Well, yeah, I would actually put God rest his soul, Archbishop Weekland as the one in the cry room if I can do that. I know there's a pagan. There's a pagan statement that says you can't say anything good, anything but good things about the dead, but that's actually that's more of a pagan sentiment really than it was adopted by some Christians. But so Weekland in there, and another clergyman who died this past week, Callistus Ware. And the reason as my kind of saint of the week, if you will, I know he was an Orthodox. I'm not canonizing him, but in this sense, this kind of juxtaposition, if you will. So it's maybe not a perfect cry room versus saint, but hopefully I can explain it. Weekland did more than just about anyone else of his generation to undermine the sacrality of the liturgy. All right, he was a man for the banality of the liturgy, probably more than anyone else in his day, especially by undermining the Benedictines, whose very, you could say, reason for being there, raison d'etre, is to worship God in the holiness of the liturgy. So he does more as abbot primate to undermine that than just about anyone else could have in the entire world. And around about the same time, there's the liturgical upheaval in the Latin Church, who we know now as Bishop Callistus Ware is converting from Anglicanism to Orthodoxy. He was a brilliant man. I mean, he had his problems. Callistus Ware did. You can look him up. But overall, he was quite the scholar and had a lot of good stuff to contribute. Had he been Catholic, I'm sure that would have been exponentially more based on at least his natural gifts. And it seems like, from all I can tell from his writings, that he was really attracted by the Orthodox liturgy, and that there was something there that spoke to that desire for God that kind of more resonates with St. Augustine's. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O God, at the beginning of the Confessions. So maybe we would have had a great scholar and perhaps even a great proponent, I would guess, of the traditional liturgy in God rest his soul, Bishop Callistus Ware, had someone like Weekland not done so much to destroy the liturgy in the Latin Church. So that's why I kind of paired those two deceased prelates together like that. And so we pray for the repose of both their souls, especially Weekland, because he was responsible for so much more that was bad and was actually Catholic, so his accountability is even more. but they do kind of in a certain way, if you'll pardon me introducing an Orthodox clergyman in there, they do represent kind of these polar opposite approaches to how we're going to confront modernity. We're going to give them the sacrality of decent theology, which Bishop Ware tried to do in his own way, not always successful, and the holiness of the liturgy, or we're going to go that dumbed down route that Weakland pushed, and which clearly betrayed his own hatred for the common man by just saying, oh, the common man could never enter into the Latin Mass enough to gain anything from it. Well, I think we see from the fallout in the church what would have been the better route. So that's why I chose those two.
Muted. Yeah. It's I don't know anything about this, so I'm glad you were able to inform people like myself on that whole thing, because it's kind of just it's a headline on like crisis, and then people who don't know about it here and there. So greatly appreciate it on that. Ryan, do you want to add anything to this discussion, if you'd like?
Sure. Bishop Weakland is, to me at least, I think, sort of a microcosm of so much that is wrong with the church at the present. And what's with Weakland too, of course, there's so much you can attack and criticize that doesn't even come close to attacking his homosexuality. I mean, there's so much mismanagement, corruption, wickedness apart from that issue. Right. And so you look at, I mean, the tyrannical way he treated the faithful of his particular diocese in Wisconsin, or again, we recavated, the cathedral built by immigrants, built with their last pennies to build something beautiful. And he not only destroys it, as he's tearing out this baldacchino, which poor immigrants 150 years ago, paid, every cent they had to put up as a sign of their devotion. He's got armed security to guard as it's going in the trash to make sure nobody tries to save it, and everything else that was being thrown out of there. The guy was heterodox. He was, like Jonathan mentioned, so many things. His really hatred of the idea of anyone entering into the sacred, because he himself, I think, hated the sacred. And the fact that when Rome itself, actually the Congregation for Divine Worship under Arenzi had sent him a letter telling me he could not move forward with the plans to recavate his cathedral. He did it anyway, and nothing happened. And so we once again see, again, Paul VI directs him to, put out Jubilate Deo, right, to instruct the bishops on this document and how chant should be implemented, and in monasteries and in parishes. He completely ignores it, and the whole thing's completely ignored. He does his best to suppress it, right? Doesn't want that out there. And so the crowd that for 40 years disobeyed, 70 years disobeyed, are now the ones on the other side demanding obedience to every crazy thing that comes out of Rome, right? That when they're told you can't do this, they completely ignored it and got away with it. Now they're in positions of power and they want you obeying them, right? Always, all the time. And then, and then we come to, his own immorality, of course, taking church funds to pay off somebody he'd had a sexual relationship with, a seminarian. Again, something swept under the rug, kind of ignored. He destroyed documents on clergy sex abuse. The Rudy Koss scandal is another one. A lot of people don't remember that one. That was in the 80s. And he basically came out during a USCCB meeting and said, the problem isn't the priests, because priests need a healthy sex life, of course. This traces back to when he was an abbot, Benedictine abbot. He turned a monastery into a brothel. It took them years to clean up that monastery after he left. But he's out there. Every priest needs a healthy sex life. The problem is the kids are squealing. So we need to put programs in place to teach them not to talk about this. That was Weakland. And that's what happened, because Rudy Koss was one of these guys, very charismatic. And I don't mean in terms of charismatic movement. I mean charismatic in terms of his personality and gifts. And, he gets in, he rides through seminary. He's clearly, flagrantly homosexual. I think this is under Bishop Graham in Dallas. And he got promoted, became a priest, and was put in several parishes, started committing pederasty, was moved around in a number of parishes. And Weakland came in the wake of that scandal, say, yeah, the problem is the kids are squealing. We got to stop them from talking about it. And thus you have Let's Talk About Touching and all these kind of programs that the bishops eventually pushed out there. That's because of Weakland. This is the guy that a certain very famous priest is out there telling it, declaring to be this great scholar. They run, and then, of course, the liberal rags, they run with that line. A liturgical scholar, great bishop, unfortunately dogged by claims of impropriety, dies. It's like we're trying to restrain just a little bit how much we love him for all these evil things he did. And that's really what it is. No discipline from above. The Pope at the time was not a true pastor of the church to discipline this wolf in sheep clothing, and he continued. And so that's and it's a sign in every way of everything that's wrong with the church, from sexual immorality to financial corruption to the failure of authority to correct, and instead continue to promote guys like this who now in authority demand obedience from us.
Indeed. Yeah, it's really when you look at the legacies of gentlemen like that, it's pretty crazy. And then we have the clip now. You contrast all that stuff about how these things. A guy like Shia LaBeouf, who is not been the picture perfect person beforehand, in trouble with the law, kind of went nuts for a couple years. We all remember that, when he was like clapping in empty theaters and taking pictures of it. But here he is. We actually do have the clip of him talking to Barron.
From the office, activate the audience without putting the agency on the priest.
We have full, conscious, active participation. That's
which is where the singing and the back and forth comes from. Whereas old Latin Mass put all the agency on the priest to be fully activated. And that activation of the priest was supposed to activate the audience, to activate the laity. That all the agency was put on the priest. And so, and I don't want to get too far into this because then you get into controversy, but Latin Mass affects me deeply. And because it feels like they're not selling me a car. And when I go to some Mass with the guitars and stuff, and I'm from, Santa Ynez, right? So that's where I was catechized. And there's a lot of guitar playing. And there's a lot of what feels like they're trying to sell me on an idea. Yeah. Whereas what I feel when I went to Oakland and went to and by the way, there's a very incredible version of that as well. That's super activating and very emotional that I've experienced up there with Father Bobby.
Nice.
There's also, and Father Peter, but there's something that happened, Christ the King in Oakland does a Latin Mass every day of the week. And it feels like it's not being done to sell me on anything. Mm-hmm. And it feels almost like I'm being let in on something very special. And the quiet, it activates something in me where it feels like I found something. It's a little bit like a band. Mm-hmm. When a band is pushed on you.
All right. I'm saying this with all seriousness, and I'm not being hyperbolic. Y'all need to include Shia in your rosaries right now, because when you come out with this kind of declaration, he is now not only target from the demonic, but the boomer Novus Ordos are going to come after him like there's no tomorrow. I wish I could have seen Barron's face when he said about the guitars and the selling. I'm sure he had to pick his jaw up off the floor with that.
I'm sure that was edited to make sure not to get that angle that's facing Barron.
They also had to edit out the huge clap from his jaw actually hitting the floor. But y'all got to pray for him. We all got to double up on that, because he's going to need it.
I'm skeptical of actors who turn to religion anyway, because they're actors, and a lot of times it's a shtick of some sort. So I'm always very skeptical of that sort of thing. But I'm always hopeful and praying, because I mean, for the salvation of his soul, it's absolutely the very best thing for him. So I'll be praying it truly is genuine and it truly sticks. And because I would rather see that than to see that it was just another act.
Yeah.
You think all the Catholic professionals out there are going to get him like they did with Mark Wahlberg?
Who knows? That's another thing you got to watch out. He's got to watch out for now. There's a whole subgroup of people that are going to be all over his heels.
Right. And that's also the worst thing. Even if it's the more tratty people who want to pick him up and bolster him and make him into the next thing. And you know what it's similar to? We're talking about completely different things, by the way. I'm not comparing him to this subject, but rather the fact of the media spectacle is when an abortionist switches, gives it up, goes to confession, does penance, and becomes pro-life. Or even if they don't become Catholic, they become at least pro-life and say, yeah, everything I was doing was wrong. What, you know, a lot of the influencers do pro-life. They want to get those people out. They want to get them at conferences. They want to get them on the radio. They want to get them on streams and say, hey, look at this guy. And that's the worst thing. Those people, well, they've done horrible things. They need healing as well as, you know, penance and making up for, you know, for what they've done. And so, like you say, analogous, because obviously he's not that, but similar thing. It's like if he's really saying, wow, my life's been a wreck of all these things. I need to, you know, clean up and be good. And this moved me. I need to get closer to God. The worst thing is putting them in front of the cameras everywhere and making a thing. It also sets a pressure. It sets a burden, burns you out when at a time when you're already burnt out. And what you need is time and grace. And that's the other thing too, is like, if you come from a bad life and you're still learning, right? You don't need to go start a podcast because you converted to Catholicism and now start telling everybody about Catholicism. You know, you need that time to really come to know and love the Lord through the Catholic faith. And you need to, change your habits, change your ways of thinking. All of us have penance for our sins, the way we've injured the body of Christ. And, it's, being on a podcast, all of a sudden it's not the right place psychologically, emotionally, or spiritually.
Yeah, those guys shouldn't be dropped into becoming leaders of the church, Steve.
Right.
Exactly what Ryan was talking about is what Father Abernathy mentions in his Climacus series. And on my channel, it's the latest one that came out. It's on Exile. If you go to the podcast version, it's been a couple months ago, but exactly what he was talking about. He goes, the last thing you want to do is get your name out there, start being promoted, get your chest thumped, getting all these people to tell you how great you are and things like that. He goes, no, you should be looking for the opposite of that, hiding, getting away from things. One of the best things I was telling Rick about me not feeling too great is I haven't been on Twitter really at all the last couple of weeks. It has been glorious. Because I used to even think, man, this is going to help the website. It does. It gets like 4 clicks, maybe. Nobody cares about that unless I put a sexy thing up, and that ain't happening. But yeah, no, don't. People out there, podcasters, don't hit Shia up, please.
No. I mean, Steve and I were talking before Ryan came on, and I was at Mater Day in Dallas waiting for Ryan to give his excellent talk, which, by the way, was excellent. And thank you to everybody that came up. And I'm sorry if I'm awkward because I'm not used to it. Even the Z-list celebrity I am, just from having you wonderful people come up and be like, oh, I love News from the Pew or this and that and the other thing. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So I can only imagine what guys like Shia are going to be hit upon. But to his credit, he's kind of curmudgeon to begin with. He's always been kind of prickly. So I don't think he's really going to care if anybody wants him to come on his show. Pretty sure he's going to tell him to go away because he did it before when he was at the height of his fame and popularity after Transformers. He told everybody to just kind of bug off and leave me alone. So I don't think, and hopefully he won't have that much of an issue in that regard. But so we'll wrap up the program. Ryan, who do you have for your Saint of the Week, and who are you going to put in the cry room?
At the risk of being ridiculously patronizing, my Saint of the Week is none other than yourself, Rick Barrett of the Armed Catholic, because you drove 2.5 hours up to come listen to me blab and inured yourself to a steel chair that probably made you numb in quite a few places for, I don't know, of a total of 3.5 or 4 hours between all the talks. And to listen to me expound upon Moore and Fisher and the English Reformation. So hats off to you for that. And everyone else who came too. I met a lot of great people there, and thank you for all your kind words. Fortunately, I know myself, so I know better. So my cry room, which would have been appropriate last week, but is Liz Cheney. It's kind of an obvious one and an easy one, but for the absurdity of that particular speech she gave after she lost. So, I mean, she's not just someone who's bad. At least her father was a more able political actor, although, again, on the side of evil. But she is, without class or grace, she's a witch with a capital B. There's just no other way to put it. And I think of a lot of other less salubrious words to put up there for her, but especially when she gets up and gives this speech where she compares herself to Lincoln because she's trying to overcome the monstrous evil of Trump, which is comparable to the monstrous evil of slavery. So and ultimately what she's doing is she's saying her would-be constituents that she was determined to represent, because she's not, of course, not really going to do that. She's just trying to magnify her own power. She is basically comparing them to slave owners, to the people who couldn't see the greatness of Lincoln. Of course, we could argue that as I don't buy into that either. But that's the objective reality of what she's saying, is that all of my constituents are so stupid, they're like slave owners. That's really what she's getting into. It's a completely classless, tactless, and especially when you try to compare yourselves to great figures. I mean, Lincoln, I abhor a lot of what he did in office, and there's I know The Real Lincoln by DiLorenzo, but I can at least salute Lincoln for being self-taught and for the achievements he was able to make being self-taught, that as much as I hate everything he did, I can still acknowledge the greatness of those particular things, his quality, his rhetoric. She is nowhere near that, and so on and so forth. So she is definitely for the cry room.
All right. First of all, it was my pleasure. It was absolutely an honor to see you in person. And I, learning stuff about literate then versus literate now. It was awesome, all that stuff. And I would do it again. And I probably, the next time you're in Texas, you let me know. Right. Especially we talked about that. Steve, who you got for Saint? Who you got for Cry Room?
I'll do the Cry Room, something we've been talking about for quite some time.
Like so much else that we love about America, the freedom of the open road, our freedom to travel as far as we want, whenever we want, is under attack. Case in point, tomorrow, California's Air Resource Board is about to approve a total ban of new gasoline-powered vehicles.
Now, just what we talked about before is when we talk about something like this, or guys that Ryan and I talk about, talk about things, just give it 2 more months and mainstream media finally picks it up.
Clear assault on its residents' basic freedom of movement. Now, the rule will require that 100% of all new cars sold in the state by 2035 be free of the fossil fuel emissions. That's up from 8% today. Now, I know these changes, you hear 2035, they seem really far off, but things get ugly real fast, because in just 4 years, the current 8% EV mandate will more than quadruple to 35%. Then 4 years after that, it climbs to 68%. And then 5 years later, no new gasoline-powered vehicles will be permitted for sale in the state. Now, not even the most progressive countries in Europe have come close to such a radical anti-freedom measure. Now, what's worse, according to the Times, the California plan may be the blueprint for federal action against gas-powered cars that Biden's lawless EPA is promising to issue next year. And by the way, the Greeniac's promise of transitioning to EVs doesn't just mean cleaner air, but more savings for consumers, they're arguing. Well, that's total baloney. Now, Biden promised this big $7,500 tax credit. I know that's what you're thinking if you bought a new EV. But what he didn't tell you is, though, it came with a bunch of caveats, and many EVs don't even qualify. There's also the suspicious new rise in electric vehicle prices for nearly the identical amount of the rebate.
Told you.
So you have to ask yourself, how much will an electric vehicle that you're going to have to buy down the road actually cost you?
Surprise.
So my Cry Room is the people that allow this to happen. Anybody with 2 working brain cells can see that it's coming. They've been literally telling you it's been coming for years. We got the blueprints, we got the PDFs. It's all there. Now it's on the people to, if you let this happen, if you're in California, you let that happen, that's on you. If other states end up coming up and you do nothing about it, if you care more about your fantasy football team coming up, that's all. Forget about it, man. Stop complaining. Enjoy your EV cars and don't complain. If you're going to actually fight about that to stop that, then hey, there's your saint of the week. So those people that are going to be actually fighting for their future and their liberty, if they care about that, if they dare to celebrate July 4th for independence and say, you know what, I don't care. The cars are coming. Who cares? I'm just going to get an EV. I'm just going to tweet about how Biden sucks, whatever. You do nothing about it, you're the cry room people. If you want to do something about it, you're the saint of the week.
Well, the good thing about the EV cars, they'll be self-automating, so they can tweet how much Biden sucks while the car drives for them. So they can do two things at once. So, I mean, it's perfect in that regard. I don't really have to, since we had our full panel back. I don't have to be disgraced with nobody voting for my cry rooms, which is pretty standard. Although I did get a couple votes last week for the Dodge fake EV thing, Bob. So thank you for the few people that voted for me on that one. But we want to thank you for hanging out with us from News from the Pew. Please I don't even know how to say it. Like, subscribe, and share the News from the Pew. God bless, and now, always, and forever, Viva Cristo Rey.